Everybody's Charles, your hobby hero, and I have huge CGC news today. But first, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button down in the bottom corner. I do appreciate it. I do put out regular content about the hobbies that I love the most. Now, this is CGC card grading news that had come out today. They've been teasing a big announcement that they were going to release on the 20th for a while now. Me personally, I just thought some Wizards of the Coast employee had already snuck up the 1-of-1 ring and got it graded at CGC. But today the announcement came out, and depending on how you fall on the argument, no such luck. So the overarching theme of the announcement was that CGC has combine their CGC card grading with CSG, their sports card grading, and merge those two companies together. However, it does seem like they are going to basically take everything that they had implemented on the sports card side and move it over to the non-sports card side, which pretty much encompasses all the other card grading they do. If you do Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, the Marvel trading cards, any of that stuff is now going to be under this combined banner, which for better or worse comes with a lot of pros and cons. So we're going to be talking about what exactly this means for people who are submitting, what I like about the merger, and what I dislike about this merger. So first and foremost is that you can now submit baseball cards and sports cards with non-sports cards. So if you're trying to hit those minimum bulk thresholds and you've got X number of sports cards, you can combine those together, send them to one place. They'll go one shipping in, one shipping back out, and you can combine the orders instead of trying to make a full sports card order and a full non-sports card order. So it can help lower cost in that regard. I don't submit sports cards, but for those of you who do submit both sports and non-sports cards, this is a huge plus and something I'm glad they did. There was really no reason for one company to have two separate arms of their company that are both grading cards. For all intents and purposes, the same grading metrics for the most part just needed to be under one umbrella. I am glad they did that. The second aspect of this is now that you do not need a membership to submit. You can just go and submit. Now, their memberships were basically free anyways, because whatever you spent on the membership, you basically got a credit for, and you got a discount on your submissions going forward. I submit quite a bit through the comics side of it and to a lesser extent on the card side of it. So I have a membership so I can enjoy those discounts. Not a benefit to me, but for those of you who may just send one or two things in over the course of a year, this is an awesome benefit to you, as you do not have to have that membership, that auto-renewing sometimes membership, to submit those cards to CGC. Now, when we talk about how the sports card side seems to have a bigger impact than the non-sport as far as this merger goes, they are changing the label of the CGC labels. So the current CGC labels look very similar to their comic book labels, with that blue color for the universal labels, the grade and the big white box, etc. They are moving away from that and embracing the sports card side that they have, which are these black labels, very generic in my opinion looking labels. They look very similar to me to the SGC labels, which I don't find to be attractive labels. They definitely do not detract from the card because they are not eye-popping or eye-catching, and there were a lot of complaints about the blue labels. I was not one of those people. Being a comic book collector, I enjoyed the blue labels, but the centering inside of the white box that was on the labels was a big point of complaint. So I think they tried to minimize this, trying to streamline it. In my opinion, maybe looks too similar to a lot of the other labels that are out there, but I'm assuming they did their market research and maybe similarity is what the market wants. With this new label comes some new trade-offs as well. They have adjusted their grading rubric to be more in line with their sport card side of it, which has been done for a while now. and it basically has eased their grading restrictions up. Their 9.5s were gem mint. Most of the rest of the industry that grades cars considers a gem mint to be a 10, whereas with CGC prior to this announcement, they were a 9.5. So now all currently existing 9.5s in their inventory that they have graded in the past will be bumped up to 10s, and if you want to get them reholdered and the 9.5 up to a 10, they are allowing you to do that with a $5 reholder fee per card, and it has to be submitted before September 30th. After September 30th, they will not reholder those, even though they will be reflected in their database as 10s. You will have to keep them in a 9.5 slab or get them regraded. I do like that they finally got that in line. Now, what it means in the short term is that CGC 10s are probably going to lose value. Prior to this, CGC, I would say, was probably the hardest 10 to get in the industry. And this is basically them admitting that they were too hard on those and that they're going to make it easier to get 10s. So I would say that you're going to have 10s about the same caliber or quality as PSA 10s, but PSA has just got a longer reputation, longer history, more people who collect it, so that PSA 10 is still going to hold a higher premium than the CGC 10s, and now you're basically backing off and saying that there's nothing that's really separating them quality-wise, that they're probably being graded with very similar grading rubrics. They're also getting rid of subgrades at CGC, which I absolutely do not like. I think the reasoning behind getting rid of them is absolutely ridiculous, stating that less than 5% of their submissions were coming through with the request for subgrades, so therefore they don't see a demand in the market for it and had gotten rid of it. The problem with that logic is they have priced themselves out of subgrades. I think at this current time, subgrades are $15 per card, which is almost the same as the grading fee per card, and it doesn't add any extra value. I mean, there are very few circumstances where the subgrades could even possibly add enough additional value to justify the $15 price tag. For me, as a consumer looking in, I could be wrong, it doesn't seem like this process of adding subgrades should really cost them next to anything other than the extra ink on the label. They weren't redesigning labels. They weren't using a separate label whenever they were using subgrades. These grades should already be known because these are the grades they use to give the final grade to the card. So just including that information on the label really should not have come with a $15 price tag. Something in the $3 to $5 range, and I do think you would see a very large number of consumers who would find value in those subgrades, because I know I did early on in CGC's days whenever it was, I think, $3 a card to get subgrades. I put subgrades on almost every single card that I submitted, minus cards that were just being submitted for fun or to fill in an order, or really just didn't have a ton of value other than to me personally anyways. But for any card that I thought was worth grading for the extra value, I would slap on the subgrades just as that reassurance of where the imperfections in that card would be. So I absolutely do not like this. I think they're leaving a lot of money on the table if they price the service correctly. But honestly, with the design of the new labels, that doesn't even leave room for that as well. Having said that, without subgrades, they've also gotten rid of the CGC Perfect 10 grade. So if you were not familiar with it, this is equivalent in quality of card for CGC as the BGS Black label. So it is a next level of your 10, basically saying, hey, there are 10s and then there are perfect 10s, and this perfect 10 obviously came with a very high premium to it as well, because they were just very hard to acquire. Now those will not be graded as perfect 10s. They will not exist. They will have their gem mint 10s and their pristine 10s, but they will not have that separate category of a perfect 10. With the loss of the subgrades, you also lose that as well. So that pretty much wraps up all the changes that they are going to be rolling out Now, do I think this is a good decision or a bad decision long term? On the whole, I think this is going to be a very immediate net negative for CGC. I think they're putting themselves in a situation where they're almost direct competition with PSA, and I don't think that's where you wanted to be at this stage in the game. Now, maybe they think that they're ready to compete with PSA directly, and that was the impetus behind this decision. But I think for me personally, it makes the two products too similar for me to say that it's worth it to submit to CGC when you have a PSA product that is out there that is extremely similar and the resale value is stronger, more robust, easier to move, more liquid. There's a lot of things for collectors that are important. If you're a reseller or a flipper, that are tremendously important that you have now put yourself in direct comparison and competition with. Whereas before, they were kind of this unique hybrid between BGS and PSA. They had that upside potential of that elite 10 status that BGS had, but their cost and pricing was more in line with PSA. Whereas if you're getting stuff graded by BGS, and you're shooting for those black labels, like it gets very cost prohibitive very quickly because their grading fees are so high, especially with the subgrades. If you want subgrades on the card, it is a tremendous expense through BGS, with really the only payoff being that black label, that prestigious black label. And you had a product like CGC that was kind of a hybrid between the two. They've lost that, and now they're almost in direct competition with PSA. The changing in the label, again, a lot of people complained about the old label. I'm not going to be able to see all the people that were complaining about the label. I'm sure they had industry experts that were feeding them information on what the label should be, but what you've created now is people who are collectors and like uniformity in their collection. They're going to have old label CGC stuff as they continue. If they continue with CGC, they're going to have new label CGC stuff, and they are not going to match. I have half of, well, more than half, about 2/3 of my base set Shadowless Pokemon set graded through CGC. I didn't have like the item cards graded yet, but at this point, like if I send them in right now, I can still get the old labels. They'll match my whole set. But if I'm not wanting to do that at this point, and I want to do it in the future, then they're not going to match the rest of the set I have in unless I spend $5 per card to send all the other cards back in to get reholdered with the new slab. So you have that too. You're going to lose a lot of people just due to the inconsistency in the labels. And then from an overall value aspect, you have basically devalued your 10s. And, you know, in the market, you had your PSA 10s were what everybody was wanting. While PSA held such a premium is because they were the softest 10s. They were easy to get 10s with, but people want 10s in their collection. And from a standpoint, I understand, and I am happy that CGC is moving along the line where they're not kind of holding 10s away from their consumers. But in the very short term, it is going to dramatically decrease the value of the 10s that they already have in the system, because now every 9.5 that is out there gets a upgrade to a 10 for a $5 investment on the slab, and then their system is just automatically going to be done. So what does this mean for you as the consumer? Well, if you're like me and you have a set that you're trying to complete that is in the old slabs and you want your slabs to match, you've got, I think, till the end of this month to get those in, because as of July 1st is when the new changes, I believe, are going into effect. So anything submitted after that point in time will be with the new labels. If you've got a bunch of 9.5 cards, that would benefit financially from getting upgraded to that 10, which most would increase in value more than $5 to have that slab updated. You now have a deadline of September 30th to get all those cards submitted. I know for me, I've got a stack of probably about 15 to 20 cards. I'll be sending in cards that I had considered regrading, but the regrading cost was too high. So I will probably just be resubmitting them for the $5 reholders and having them upgraded to the CGC 10 slabs. And then if you're in the market for some of those, right now is a great time to go out and buy those CGC 9.5s while you have this window to get those upgraded. Cash in on the fact that people may not understand that all those 9.5s are going to be upgraded automatically. You might be able to find some potential 10 candidates on the cheap by buying those 9.5s off of eBay or on your Facebook groups, wherever you purchase those at, and turn around, send them in for $5 and make a nice little profit that way as well. But that's my thoughts on the changes that CGC announced today. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Until next time, guys, Hobby Hero